Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. So we're here to talk about creating a culture of empowerment and how we can apply the open source philosophy of empowerment to management and organizational structure. My name is Todd Nienkerk. As you know, I'm a digital strategist and partner at 4Kitchens. If you want to get a hold of me later on, you can email me there or follow me on Twitter at Todd Ross. Warning in advance, it's mostly bad puns and dumb jokes, such as the following. You may not know who I am, but I'm big in Minnesota. Woo! Yeah. All right. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that this is an unusual talk for a Drupal camp, and really any technology conference at all. We're not going to talk about Drupal. We're not going to talk about the web. We're not going to talk about technology. We are not going to talk about process. We're going to talk about feelings. Feelings and management and business and all of the things that everybody here tries to avoid all the time. We're going to talk about psychology and neurology and linguistics and how all of these things come together to create an excellent team and an excellent work environment. So I want to thank you for choosing to have me speak about this rather unusual subject at an event that is otherwise reserved solely for technology and theming and headless Drupal and all the stuff that you're going to learn about over the next couple of days. Disclaimer, you are going to hear me talk a lot about how we do things at 4Kitchens. That's because that's my experience. It's the only job I've had for the last 10 years. That's what I know. We've made a lot of mistakes. So the lessons that we've learned are through trial and error, successes and failures, and it's not intended to brag at all about what we're doing or to communicate that we somehow have cracked the code and we're doing it better than everybody else. That's not the case. I'm going to talk about a lot of things that we're not doing well. But I want to assure you that all of this is through a process of trial and error, and that's how we all learn. And so I hope that you all also try things and fail things and improve and grow. And finally, my opinions and a lot of the things that we talk about related to culture are focused largely on culture within the United States, and that's an important thing to note. How many people here are not from the United States? But used to be? Yeah, okay. Who else? Who else? I think, okay, we've got a couple of people, one. So thank you for traveling all the way to Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've given this talk in other countries, and I have to disclaim that because culture is defined by nations and languages and locality and all kinds of things that we'll talk about later. So what I say may not apply to everybody in this room, also because I come from a different part of the United States. I'm here today because I want to help people run better companies by making teams and leaders happier. So how many of you are business owners? How many of you are leaders within your organization? And how many of you are none of the above? Thank you for being here, for listening to this. This is not just a talk for owners and leaders. This is a talk for everybody at an organization, but we're going to talk about a lot of very specific, actionable things that you can take back to your organization, things that everybody here can do, change that everybody here can affect. I want to start with a story. So in the summer of 2000, it was the height of the original .com bubble. We're probably in another one right now. We are in one right now. In the original, don't let anybody hear that. In the summer of 2000, height of the .com bubble, I worked at an organization, a startup, of course, out of Dallas, that built internet kiosks for shopping malls. Now, these days, that idea doesn't make any sense because we all have the internet in our pocket. But 15 years ago, if you're walking around the mall and you're at all internet or web savvy and you want to check your email or look up the price of something or just kill time and chat with your friends on AOL Instant Messenger or whatever you wanted to do, you'd go up to one of these kiosks, these enormous hulking metal, plexiglass, childproof, waterproof, advertisements everywhere on plasma screens that each weighed 75 pounds and just this enormous thing, right? My job was to upload all of the advertisements that appeared on those plasma screens, and it would take hours and hours and hours because we were all on ISDN connections. So I would stay up all night and upload videos. That was my job. One day, I got an email along with the entire company that said, as of today, effective today, you can only have 2 snacks out of the break room every day. So this was a startup, right? And one of the things that startups love to do is, they're going to put a ping pong table somewhere because that's going to make you happy. And they're going to feed you a bunch of food and a bunch of soft drinks because that's going to make you happy. And we get this email that says you get 2 snacks now. You're limited to 2. You used to have as many as you wanted. Now you can have 2. What did that do? Save money? Potentially. We'll talk about that. What else did it do? You get an email like that, what do you immediately think? It broke morale. Absolutely. Let's talk about the numbers. So the snacks that we're talking about are those teeny tiny little flimsy foil bags of Doritos and Fritos and all of that garbage, right? So let's say on the high end, those things cost 50 cents. They don't, but let's say they cost 50 cents a piece. So that means 2 snacks a day. That's $1 a day per person, $5 a week per person. How much does that cost a company when there are 20 people? $100 a week. That's $5,000 a year. Is that going to save somebody's job? No. No way. Why do I know these numbers? Because me and every other person at the company instantly did the math. As soon as we got that email, we thought, at most these snacks cost 50 cents, and so that's $1 a day, and that's $5 a week, and there's 20 people here, so that's $100 a week. That's we're going to do this, and nobody's going to save their job. It broke morale. We're going out of business. They are so strapped for cash they can't afford $5,000 a year. How could they possibly afford me? My job is to upload videos all day. They could find, anybody could do that. And I was right out of high school. I had no idea what I was doing, really. So there's that. But there's something deeper, and there's something more subtle, and there's something that management didn't think about. So let's go through management's head. They realize they have to cut costs. So they start looking, they're like, we don't want to fire anybody. That's the last thing you want to do. That's terrible. That's worse for morale. Where can we cut costs? We have this break room with all these snacks. Okay, let's try to cut down consumption of the snacks. Let's keep the snacks, but limit them. So the intentions were good, right? They wanted to continue to give people snacks, but they had to limit them because they couldn't spend $10,000 as opposed to 5, who knows? But there's something else. There's a problem they created besides morale when they did that. Any ideas?
You're going to have employees police each other.
Yes, you're going to have employees policing each other. That's exactly right. So now, I'm on the lookout for people that eat 3 snacks. Oh man, Mike ate 3 snacks yesterday. What a jerk, right? The whole empire is going to come crumbling down because of the 3 snacks that Mike ate yesterday. So now we're policing each other. Or alternatively, it's somebody's job to police everybody else. So now you have a full-time employee whose job is to, sit in the break room and check out snacks and tally off what people take, and you have to go in there and say, I'd like may I please have a Dr. Pepper? Can I please have an awful bag of Fritos, right? Now, how much does that full-time person cost a year to police the break room? More than $5,000, right? So they created a problem for themselves, and they created a culture that then looked at itself and policed itself and blamed itself and each other. So what should they have done? Oh, here's another idea, by the way. Then you raise all these, because immediately what starts happening? People start asking questions about this policy. Oh, there's new policy. Where can I start poking around the edges of this policy? What if I eat 1 snack on Monday? Can I have 3 on Tuesday? Can I carry them over? Do they accumulate? Are these rollover snacks? Back in the day we had rollover minutes. Are these like rollover minutes? So now somebody has to answer all these emails, and they have to spend all this time working on policy, and this is an executive, and they probably make $5,000 at least a week, right? So now they're spending a week dealing with this policy. There goes the $5,000 they saved. What should they have done instead? Any ideas? Let us eat the snacks. That's the first right. But let's say they actually can't afford them. What should they have done? Take them away completely. Hey, we had snacks for a while, now we don't. People still do the math. They're still going to think well, I probably had about 2 or 3 snacks a day, so what is it? Okay, $5,000 to $10,000 a year if we're all eating the same amount of snacks. And they'd say okay, well, I can see how they need to cut that. That's the conclusion they reach. So even though it was well-intentioned to do some as opposed to none, it backfired because it inverted the culture. So what do I mean by culture? Let's look at the dictionary. These days it's dictionary.com, not the dictionary. So dictionary.com says, culture is the behaviors and beliefs characteristic of a social, ethnic, or age group. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average American on a workday works 8.7 hours. 8.7 hours. So that's more than a third of your day. Your workplace is a social group that is as relevant to you as your family. You spend about as much time around your coworkers as you do your family. So your workplace is a social group, therefore it has a culture. And I believe that going beyond the dictionary.com definition of culture, that it affects how you think and feel about a group. It's not just reflective of those values, but it affects how you actually think and feel about a group from the outside looking in. So I want to run a bit of an experiment to demonstrate this. So if you'll bear with me, I want you to think for a moment, what is the culture of the United States? Now I'm going to show you a series of images, and just quietly, don't shout anything out, just quietly to yourself, notice what you're feeling when you look at these images. Just make a mental note of what you feel. How did those images make you feel? Good? Mixed? More specific emotions. Crowd? Proud. Angry. We all saw the same images. I'm sorry? Ashamed. Familiar. So we all saw the same images. Proud, ashamed. Those are opposite emotions, but we saw the same pictures. The point of this is everybody has a slightly different reaction to what is essentially the same culture. So none of us here really agrees on what that culture is, obviously. And that's because culture has many layers. The first layer of culture is the overall human culture. We as a species have a culture. Anthropologists, social scientists, psychologists, they have all observed that there are, for example, that there are underlying sets of emotions and expressions that are recognized across the world. Regardless of your culture, where you were raised, when you were raised, a smile is a smile, it indicates happiness. A frown is a frown, it indicates sadness. There are a handful of base emotions that we all share as humans. This includes uncontacted tribes, Western civilization, Eastern civilization, everything. Next is language. Language informs our culture in some really, really profound ways that I'll talk about a little bit later. But suffice to say for now that language affects how we communicate and how we reason, how we think about things, how we reach the conclusions that we reach. And if you go from one part of the United States to another, from California to Minneapolis, from New York to Austin, we all use different languages. So here in Minnesota, you say things like, don't you know, right? And in Texas, we say things like, y'all. And we say y'all because the English language has a minor deficit, and that is we have no second person plural. So how do you indicate you plural? Well, so we've all made stuff up regionally. There's yous, yous guys. Yo originally meant plural you, y'all. So we've all come up with our own solutions for this regionally. We have national cultures, or maybe ethnic cultures. The United States is different from Canada. They're very, very, very similar, but there are some values that are simply not shared across the two. So if you look at something like universal healthcare, that is a cultural value in places like Canada and the UK. It's something that they are very proud of. It's something that they take very seriously. In the United States, it's something that we fight about angrily, right? It is clearly not a cultural value that we agree on in the United States. Should we have free and available universal health care to everybody in the country? We have local cultures, and it can get really local. So there's a difference between New York and Minneapolis, obviously. The way people talk, the way people walk, the way they dress, the way they behave. But it can be as different as between here and the Mall of America. There are going to be different cultures. There are going to be different groups. There are different neighborhoods. I know that Minneapolis, for example, has an enormous Somali population, so there are Somali neighborhoods. You're all in the same geographic area, but you're only a few miles or blocks apart. So locality matters a great deal as well. And then finally, there's the culture of the self. And we tend to overlook this. We each have our own individual culture within ourselves. The experiences we've had, the childhood we had, the education we received or did not receive, the work we do, the families, where we grew up, everything. So all of these different layers, and many more as well, create this incredibly diverse texture that is culture and inform what I mean by culture specifically. So we've defined culture, let's define empowerment. GoodOldDictionary.com. It's the giving or delegation of power or authority. So that's what's being given. But what's being received? What does it mean to be empowered? Not to empower someone, but to be empowered, what does that mean? I believe it's 4 things. The first is autonomy. The autonomy to decide what you will do and how you will do it. 2, the freedom to challenge without fear or reprisal. Being able to share your thoughts and feelings, not being afraid to challenge, being able to speak your mind without being shut down or fired or ignored or hated. 3, the power to effect change. You actually have to be able to do something. And 4, you have to have ownership of the outcome. So autonomy, to decide what you will do and how you will do it. The freedom to challenge without fear of reprisal. The power to effect change. And then the ownership of all of the above. That you are accountable for the decisions you make and you own up to them. In other words, to tie it all together, empowerment means controlling your destiny. So what? Who cares? Why does that matter, really? Especially in this context. Why in a business context does empowerment matter so much? And especially, why are we talking about it here at a professional conference? There's some really clear business reasons for this. Empowerment makes teams happy. It increases productivity, quality, retention. When people feel like they have control over the work that they're doing, they're happier. And people want that control. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. Empowerment makes your clients happy. So when your team is happy, that happiness, that satisfaction, that enthusiasm that they bring to the work that they do is infectious. Your clients, your coworkers, they hear it, they feel it, they see it. On every phone call, every video call, and every email, they pick up on it. And more importantly, when a team is empowered, they can do things to make the client happy. When a team is not empowered, they say things like, yeah, that's not really my department. Or, I don't know, we've always done it that way. Or, yeah, my boss just told me to do it like that. You know, and they kind of shrug it off. Not my problem. I'm not going to do anything about it. Sorry, I can't. But if they are empowered, the client is going to have a better experience. The product will be better in the long run. Because everybody on the team can do something about it. Hey, that thing, that's stupid, that's dumb, I'm going to solve that. And I have the power to do it. And finally, for the leaders and the owners in the group, if your team is empowered, you can effectively delegate. And that means that you have less things that you need to pay attention to. It means that you don't have to be a micromanager. And it means that you can focus on long-term goals of your team or organization, which is why you're in leadership to begin with. So rather than having to focus on the day-to-day and is that story, this user story in this project for this client getting done, that's not your job. Your job is to think about how this organization is going to survive in a year or 3 years or 5 years. So how many people here have said to your significant others or your friends or your coworkers at some point, I feel like all I'm doing is reacting instead of planning? I probably say that every day. It's incredibly common, and you shouldn't be ashamed to feel that way at all. That's what it's like to run a business. You're like problems constantly, every day there's something. Somebody's unhappy, a project isn't going right, there's, you forgot to pay a bill for the rent, who knows? There's just always something that happens and you have to react to it, react to it, react to it. But the more you can delegate this stuff and empower people to be in charge of it, the happier they will be because they've been entrusted with responsibility, and the happier you will be because then you can focus on the longer term stuff that you really need to do, the stuff that you're really good at, the reason why you were put in that position to begin with. So I promised tactical, practical advice, and I'm about to get there, I promise. But I'm a big believer in understanding the why before we get into specifics. So I want to outline some general principles of empowerment so that you can understand why these policies and these actionable things, why I suggest that you do them, and also so that you can go off and do your own and come up with your own ideas to empower your teams, because you will understand the underlying philosophy of empowerment. So first and foremost, build a company you want to work for. For those of you who have started a business at some point in the past, why did you start a business? Why did you do that to yourself? Why? Because you burned out at a previous job and you didn't want to work for the man. You didn't want to work for somebody else. Any other reasons? You wanted to fill a need. A personal need? Or a need in the world that you identified? Both. We'll go with both. Excellent. Okay? You wanted to fill a need. You saw something that needed to be done and nobody was doing it. You didn't want to work for somebody else anymore. Exactly. Wanted to be empowered and knew that if it was your own company, you'd be fully empowered to do anything you wanted there. You saw a need, you wanted to fill it, you were empowered to do so by starting your own company. You didn't want to work for somebody else anymore, probably because, I would venture to guess, everybody who's done that, and I've done that, you weren't given enough responsibility and enough empowerment at that previous job. So you left. You thought, this is bonkers over here. I'm going to go do my own thing. I know how to do it better. I'm not being taken seriously. I'm out. See ya.
The culture was toxic too.
And the culture was toxic. So you knew that there was a better culture that you could help shape. That's the number one reason why people start their own companies. They want to be empowered. Okay, now think about it. Everybody that you currently work with, not everybody, but a lot of the people that you currently work with want the same thing. So what are they going to do? They're going to leave. If you empower them, you increase retention. You're creating a company you want to work for. Now think on that thought for just a moment. Think to yourself, everybody in the room, would you want to work for you? What would it be like to have you, a clone of you, as your boss? What would that be like? Terrifying? You have interesting conversations. Yes, you would. You would get no work done. Best reviews ever. So think about your style. Think about how you behave at work. When you want to create a company that you would want to work for, you have to think about what you are like as a boss or as a manager or as a leader. So that's the first principle. Build a company you want to work for. Secondly, you have to treat your coworkers as responsible professionals. They are absolutely not children that you need to watch over. We are all in this room in the knowledge economy. We are all doing creative and technical work that involves a lot of empathy, a lot of creative problem solving. It's a lot of sitting inside one's own head for a long period of time. We're not children. We got to where we are being very responsible, motivated, self-driven. Our industry is a self-taught industry. Everybody is here because you had to teach yourself design, UX, programming, management. There really isn't much of a school out there. There are law schools, there are medical schools, for all kinds of vocations under the sun, you can go get a degree. Web design and development, not really. There are a couple, but they're rare. Everybody here taught themselves because you had power over your own destiny and you wanted to change what you were doing. So you don't need to be managed in the ways that other industries might need to be managed. You want the freedom of freelancing, but the security of a full-time job. The people you're working with want the freedom balanced with the security. So you have to find ways to give them the freedom as if they were freelancers, to set their own schedules, to work on creative things, to have projects on the side. I'll talk about all of that in a moment. Most importantly, though, let people succeed or fail. Just let them. The best way to learn is to fail. And that's going to suck a little bit for everybody. but no better way to learn. If you're told how to do something, you might do it, and there's going to be a part of you that's like, yeah, right. You don't need to tell me, or like, pfft. You don't really learn it. But if you fail and you realize, I should have done it that way, that's when it really takes hold. And finally, you have to make trust the center of your culture. You have to really mean it. So trust facilitates empowerment. It's the grease that makes the empowerment gears turn. You can't actually empower someone until you trust them, and they're not going to believe you until they trust you. Make sure that everybody, including especially management, owns their mistakes. So when you fail, be the first to admit it quickly, because by doing so, you're demonstrating that failure is okay. Then you talk about the lessons you learned, and you talk about what you're going to do differently next time. And you do it publicly in front of everyone. That creates trust because it shows that everybody is allowed to talk about what didn't go well, and everybody is allowed to openly discuss failure. Nobody has to be afraid of it. Let's talk about what everybody here can do. I mentioned earlier that language was important. Language is the most important thing. The most important thing. And here's why. So, let's think for a moment about what language is, just to yourself. When you think of language and you think of its purpose, what do you think of? Most people reach the conclusion that language exists because there are thoughts in our head that need to get out, that need to be communicated to other people. And the only way to communicate the ideas in your head is through saying them or signing them or writing them, right? That's been the theory for thousands of years. But in fact, modern neurology and psychology have reached a different conclusion. And that is that language creates thought. Without language, we do not possess high levels of reasoning. And it is the language that reshapes our brain to be able to create the complex thoughts that we then communicate using the same language. It's a very, very, very profound finding. It means that without language, we are not what we think we are. We are more reptilian without language. So, what does that mean? It means that language physically alters your brain. Now, we know that memories and any kind of experience or whatever create new pathways in the brain. And when people say, oh, well, it's creating a new pathway in the brain, they mean physically a thing is getting connected to another thing in your brain with flesh. Right? And every time you think of the same thing or do the same thing, you're reinforcing that behavior, and that pathway in your brain becomes physically larger. This is not like a figurative thing. There are literal pathways in the brain that get thicker the more you do something. So your brain is physically changing. Language, therefore, physically alters your brain and the way you think. So I believe, as a result, that different languages and the grammars that those different languages possess create differently shaped brains, and therefore people who speak different languages reason in different ways. People whose primary language is German think differently. They process logic differently than people whose primary language is Japanese. Very profound. So let's extend this to the workplace. The words you use affect how people work. And I mean small words, not big words like strategy and synergy. Small words. I versus we. I'd like this to be done. We would like this to be done. There's a big difference there. I is exclusive, we is inclusive. There's this, there is no I in team. It's a cliche that everybody kind of like groans about, and they're like, that's so cheesy. Why do we think something like that is cheesy? Why do we think something like that is like a big corporate joke? It's because the people who say it usually don't mean it. But what if we meant that? What if we really sat down and agreed that when we say there is no I in team, there is no me, there's we? That we're not just coming up with snappy things that we throw around at meetings to try and get people pumped up in really fake ways? What if you're actually reflecting part of your culture and you mean it and there's follow through behind it? Right? That's why we make fun of those motivational posters, teamwork and and there's there's a boat and everybody's paddling the boat. It's cheesy because people who have that stuff don't mean it. Or if they do, they rarely do. So you have to be genuine in your language. The number one word I hate is employees. Using the word employee instantly creates and reinforces a power structure that we're all afraid of. If you're an employee, that means that there is somebody hovering over you who is your employer, and they're in charge of you, and you owe them your livelihood. So you don't have employees. You have coworkers, you have colleagues, you have a team. There's a big difference there, and if you mean it genuinely, you can change the culture of an organization. Ask for input every single day in different ways, in big ways, small ways, hallway conversations, annual reviews, surveys, feedback. Constantly ask for input. People want to be heard more than they want to be agreed with. One more time, because that's an important one. People want to be heard more than they want to be agreed with. People just want their problems to be heard. They don't necessarily want them solved. How many people have had a conversation with somebody where they just kind of go off and they're like, man, sorry, I just had to vent. I feel so much better now. They wanted to be heard. They didn't want to be agreed with. So you have to create opportunities for people to be heard. And you have to solicit input. So for the longest time, we had what we would call an open door policy at Four Kitchens. Well, we all have open door policies, right? Open door means you can just walk into this open door, whether it's physical or virtual or whatever, and you can talk to anybody about anything, anytime. And we meant it. We really did. Very few people would walk through that door physically or figuratively, right? So we had to start creating time, reinforcing time, setting aside time to have that conversation, where every 2 weeks we're going to sit down for half an hour and we're going to talk about the following 3 or 4 things plus any questions or concerns that you have. They get to think about that over the course of 2 weeks and come prepared. Or at least they have time to stop what they're doing and say, okay, I've got this meeting, I have half an hour to talk about stuff, I'm going to clear my head, I'm going to be engaged with a person, and stuff is going to start coming out. But if you have an open door policy, everybody's too busy to walk in the door. So you have to set aside time. Then finally, when you're doing these kinds of check-ins and you're having these kinds of conversations, you need to make sure that you're asking the right questions to solicit good answers. If you ask stupid questions, you're going to get stupid answers. How you doing? I'm fine. That's the answer, right? Somebody asks how you're doing, you say, I'm fine. That's how it works in our culture. You have to ask questions that require thoughtful responses, such as, if you could change one thing about this organization right now, what would it be? Questions like that catch people off guard in a good way. So if somebody walks in the room and they say, you ask them, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. What are you most stressed out about right now? Oh man, where do I even start? Right? Well, then they're not fine, are they? So you have to ask the right kinds of questions and change it up a bit. And in doing so, you have to provide these feedback channels that are accessible, non-argumentative, and genuine. Accessible means people have to have the time or the energy or they're physically able to do it or the phone number works or whatever it is. It has to be something that people can actually get to. Non-argumentative means when people are giving feedback, they don't want to be argued with because as soon as you start arguing with them, they shut down. And they're like, well, I'm just not going to say anything ever again because it got contentious. You're just there to listen, right? People want to be heard more than they want to be agreed with. So listen to them. And finally, you have to really mean it. You can't just go through the motions. You have to genuinely be interested in what they're doing, and you have to have the ability to follow through with changing things if you need to, which means you might not be the right person to do this. You might not be genuine enough because either you don't have the right, presence, or you don't have the time to do something about it, in which case you can't be genuine. You have to find somebody else to do this, who can make those changes happen, who does have that time to invest in this. There's a great example in the manufacturing world. Who here has heard of Toyota's Andon cord? Okay, very quickly. The original manufacturing assembly line process that Ford came up with back in the day revolutionized manufacturing, of course. But it had this weird flaw. And the flaw was you could never stop the assembly line. The assembly line had to keep moving no matter what happened. Because for every minute the assembly line was down, Ford was losing $1 million or something insane, right? So if the assembly line shut down, all these alarms go off and there's panic and people are running around and they're saying, why is the line stopped? Why is the line stopped? Like, we got to keep going. We're losing money, go, 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 right? That's the attitude. So what happens, of course, when people find faults, they don't get fixed. And this is actually what happened in Ford's plants for many, many years. Somebody would see that something was installed incorrectly. Sometimes it would be minor, like there was a poor weld, or a bolt wasn't installed properly. Sometimes it was serious, like the airbag is missing. So what they do is, it's moving down the assembly line, they take a note, they slap it on the car, next car. It continues to be built, which means they put the hood on, they put the dash in, they put the steering wheel on, they start to put all the stuff around the faulty bead of weld, around the missing bolt, around the missing airbag or brake system or whatever, and now you have a fully built and assembled car that goes out into a lot, and there's a whole lot at the assembly plant that's nothing but cars that have problems. And it's somebody's job to go into the lot one day and be like, okay, I got to fix all these cars. That one. Okay, I have to pull out everything. I have to strip it down to its frame and fix this weld and then reassemble it all by hand. That's idiotic, right? Idiotic. How much time and energy is wasted in assembling and then disassembling and reassembling a car to fix something that should have been done right the first time? So Toyota looked at this manufacturing line and they said, we're going to put a stop in the line. We're going to have a cord that runs the entire length of the assembly line. It's called the andon cord. Anybody can pull it. Pulling it stops the line. Dead. The robots stop moving. It's done. Now, if this were Ford, what happens? Everybody freaks out. We're losing money. What's happening? This is crazy. Who did that? Who did that? Who did that? Why'd you do that? This is where genuine, non-argumentative feedback channels become important. Because the andon cord is accessible. It's physically there. You can pull it at any time. But it's still argumentative and it's not genuine. Because when you pull it, people get mad. You're losing money. Who did this? Why did you do it? That's not a good enough reason. So Toyota, when they implemented this system, they knew that they had to have a culture of, you pull the cord, somebody comes over and says, thank you. What did you find that was wrong? And how are we going to fix it forever? And they will spend as much time as is necessary to fix not just that car, but the thing that caused that car to not be manufactured correctly to begin with. Non-argumentative, genuine, accessible. You should hire the right people. This is the whole cultural fit debate. You absolutely should hire the right people. So here's the version of this slide that I used to tell. The version is, we have this thing called the airport test. And the airport test is this thought experiment that we engage in. When we're interviewing a potential candidate, we think, okay, if I'm stuck at an airport for 6 hours with this person, what does that feel like? Does that feel like it's at least tolerable? Or does it feel like really annoying? Or is it just going to drive me nuts, right? And that's the airport test. And we didn't come up with this, you know. This is a thing that gets bounced around every so often. So I used to say that. And we're like, oh, that's great. So I wrote about this. I was interviewed for some business publication, and I got quoted about it. And I was so excited. I was like, oh, I'm in this thing, you know, like I got quoted in this article, and I put it on Facebook. And then some, people at Facebook start reading it, and it gets kind of picked up, and then I made the mistake of reading the internet comments. And the very first comment says, sounds like a great excuse for discriminatory hiring practices. And it defeated me because they're right. They're right. I didn't fight it because I had to stop and think, and I realized, yep, that's exactly what's happening. It's not overt, it's not intentional, it's passive, but it's a problem. So what does it mean, the airport test, actually? It means that you're looking for people that you get along with. Who do you get along with? People like you. What are people like me like? Oh, thanks. Awesome. Thank you. You can read a lot into, though, what I am like. I look a certain way. I have a certain background. I have a certain level of education. There's certain things I'm interested in. Well, people that I like are probably going to be like me and have a similar background as me. And that didn't click until somebody called me out on it publicly on the internet. And they were right. So I had to stop and think about this for a while. And I've come to two different conclusions. So rather than the airport test, there are two things that I think everybody should consider. One is, here's a modified version of the airport test. Think about if that person were stuck at an airport with your client. They don't have to be friends, but can they be civil? Are they going to behave? Are they going to be professional? That's what matters. Okay, so there's the modified airport test. And then there's a focus on values. So rather than thinking about, do I get along with this person, or do I like this person, or do I enjoy sharing sci-fi book recommendations with them, which is totally what I do all the time, think about values. Do you share the same values? Have stated, defined, written, published values, and talk to these candidates about them. We have them. We call them the Way of the Web Chef. There are 5. I have them printed right here if you want to take one home. First and foremost, exemplify transparency and honesty. That's the first thing that we look for in a candidate. The list goes on from there. Finally, hire people for your team who are smarter and better than you. It's awesome when people that you're working with are better than you because you learn from them. It creates a stronger team. It shows that you're humble. I've seen a lot of business owners and managers who are intimidated by people who show up at job interviews who are smarter or better than them and don't hire them for that reason because they don't want to be one-upped by their employees. It's the power structure again. Go virtual. Some people call this distributed or remote teams. This is a difficult one for most of you to do, I'm sure. How many people here work in the public sector or for university? Good luck. Not going to happen anytime soon, but maybe I hold out hope for humanity in the long run. Somewhere. So, going virtual. Why does this empower people? It empowers people because, I mentioned earlier, we are all in a knowledge economy. We all could go freelance and probably make more money than we currently are, but then we'd have to deal with the stress of being freelance, but whatever. But we like the freedom, right? We want the freedom to be able to live where we want, have a family or not, have pets or not, be able to go to the doctor when you got to go to the doctor and not make a big deal out of it. Flexible schedules, right? So we were a holdout in a way in the Drupal world. We were a in-person team in Austin, Texas for the first 7 years that we were in business. So we were kind of late to the game. And in fact, the very first distributed person we hired is here in the audience, Matt. He lives in San Diego. We decided we really liked Matt. We wanted to hire him, but we didn't have anything in place to make that happen. So we had to go through a transition. We had tried it once before, years earlier, and failed. And we failed because we didn't go all in. Going virtual is not something that you do a little bit of. There's no such thing as a hybrid model. It doesn't really exist. So what we decided on the day that Matt started, from that day forward, we are a distributed company. All of our meetings take place on video chat, in IRC, or these days Slack. It doesn't matter if I'm sitting across from the person. For the first few weeks, we're going to get on video chat and we're going to talk to each other through cameras. And in doing that, it reshaped the culture over time, such that I can't tell you how many times I'm in my office and I get on a video chat with somebody and we both look at the background of each other's videos and we realize, oh, we're both in the office. I'll come to your office. Default is video. Default is remote. Default is the phone. When you make that switch, this process is a lot easier. I mentioned flexible work schedules. There are things like open vacation policies and people being able to set their own times or alternative schedules. There's the 4-10 schedule, 4 days a week, 10 hours a day. Figure out a way to make that work for people. We've got a couple of people, well, Matt works on a similar kind of schedule. We have somebody who's a musician who needs an extra day to go into his home recording studio and work on music and things like that, so he works a 4-10 schedule, takes every Friday off. Still gets just as much work done as anybody else. So open vacation policy, what does that mean? It means take basically as much time off as you want, whenever you want it. I could spend a whole hour just talking about this policy, but I want to run through some of the very quick scenarios and complaints that people have about this policy. So when you tell somebody this, you can take as much time off, whenever you want, people immediately say two things. One is, yeah, well, okay, then what if I just never come to work and now you have to pay me? No, I don't. I don't. You're abusing the policy, you're fired, bye. You cannot handle this responsibility. You cannot handle this empowerment. You're abusing it. Empowerment requires accountability and ownership of the outcome, right? If you abuse a policy like this, you're not right for the culture of the organization. I could talk about that forever, but I won't. All right. Invest time and money in your team's success. So time, professional development time, set aside time during the week for them to work. Give them a budget that they choose how to spend. Empower them with the funds and the times and the ability to make their own decisions about their professional development. Empower them with projects they can work on internally during their off time. We ask for 30 billable hours a week. There are 40 hours in a traditional work week. That additional time, that 25%, is set aside for overhead, team meetings and all hands and stuff like that, professional development, open source projects, whatever. It's up to them. 30 hours. That's all we need, billable. We budget for that. That's how we forecast our time. When we go into weekly finance meetings, that's the number we use, 30 hours. Encourage people's personal brands. This one really freaks some people out. So here's what I mean by it. Again, everybody here, knowledge economy, in this kind of work, we could all be freelancers. We could all go out and make more money and set our own schedules if we wanted to. We'd be fine. We don't have to work for anybody. So you have to give people the freedom to build their own brand, because that's part of what people who go freelance want to do. They want their name to be known for what they do. They want to be respected for what they do. Don't we all? Encourage that. Now, some people say, well, if people get too good, they're going to leave. Well, two responses. One is everybody leaves. They either retire, they get sick, they die, they get fired, they find a better job. Everybody leaves. Second, if you're afraid that people are going to leave your organization because they get too good, the problem is your organization. You're not creating a place where people want to be, and they're looking to get out. Encourage people's personal brands by getting them to speak if they want to speak, write content if they want to write content, travel if they want to travel. Get really good at something and get well known. It is so satisfying to be recognized for what you do, for being good at what you do. It's incredibly satisfying. You want it, everybody you work with wants it. Let them have that. And also, this requires a lot of investment outside of work, obviously. This is not something that, you can't fit everybody's professional development and career goals into 40 hours a week. There's some element of you spend time after work doing stuff you like, hobbies or working on, a book that you're writing or whatever you're doing. So a lot of people talk about work-life balance, and that's really important. Work-life balance is a thing that we really do need to pay attention to, and it's important. But I do not believe in work-life separation. In this industry, the two are not really separate. You have to love what you're doing so much to want to do it outside of work. Not to be required to, but to want to think hey, in my downtime, I'm going to pick up, my phone or my tablet or my laptop or whatever, and I'm going to read, Boing Boing and learn about technology or whatever it is you like to do. I'm going to watch the, Mac product launch, whatever the new Apple product launch is. These are things that we do in our free time. That demonstrates that we're really interested, genuinely, in the work that we do outside of the work week. So I don't believe that there's separation for an industry like ours, but I do believe that balance is important. Adopt Agile methodologies, so Scrum, Kanban, various tools and processes. This allows teams to self-organize around projects. It empowers them to choose what will be done, in what order, and by whom. In a top-down approach, there's somebody telling everybody what, you work specifically on this story and you work specifically on that feature. Teams should be able to self-organize, and that's very empowering. So you're doing it on a project-by-project level. Obviously, don't tell people how to do things. It's micromanaging. So instead of telling people how to do things, or even what to do, set goals. By the end of the year, we need our support division to make up 20% of our annual revenue. Go. That feels pretty cool, right? Now you're like, well, I can hire people, I can do marketing, I can do some work myself. Like, what am I going to do? Do I raise rates? Do I find higher paying clients? It's very empowering for that person because they get to solve the problem themselves. But if they're told, I need you to do the following things, and you're not giving them the goal that underlies it, it's disempowering because now they just have a to-do list. They're just checking things off of a list. It's not a lot of fun. And especially around the technology and the tools that you decide. If you're in a management position or a leadership position and you're no longer really doing the work, meaning you're not working on client projects or you're not in issue queues or whatever, you have no right to tell the team what tools they should or shouldn't be using. No right, because you're not using them. Let the team decide. And if they decide they don't like that issue tracker, say, hey, go find something else. And if you like it, we'll switch, no big deal. Let them choose the tools that they want. Don't tell them how to do their work. Let them determine how they're going to do their work. Empowerment is something you have to push on. It's uncomfortable. It's something that you have to, get people to do. Most people don't believe you, first of all, when they walk in the door and you're like, we're an empowered organization. They're not really going to believe you because they're set in certain work patterns in their past. And it's hard to trust somebody with things like this. So some people find that empowerment and they take it. And they think, great, cool, I love this, I'm going to run with it. There are some people who don't. They don't pick it up. They don't run with it. And you need to give them opportunities to. You don't want to force anything, but you want to say like, hey, I'd like you to be in charge of this project that we're working on. I'd just like you to be in charge of it and run it however you want. And just see what happens. Like, what is the worst that's going to happen? That's an exercise that I like to go through, because work is stressful. So I find it very soothing, actually, to go through the exercise of what is actually the worst thing that can happen right now? What's really the worst thing? We screw up a project and a client gets mad and they don't work with us anymore and we lose money. That's the worst thing that's going to happen. You know what? It's not that bad. Not really. The company's still around. So you have to push people to take some of that empowerment and work with them on exercises like that. Because they're going to be scared of empowerment at first. They're going to be scared of the responsibility. This is related to those tools. Not telling your team what tools to use, except that they know more about your work than you do. They're actually doing the work. They should tell you how it is, not the other way around. Also, give them a lot of input and control over what your entire organization is going to do. Where should we go? What's the new technology that we need to adopt? What's the new kind of vertical that we need to get involved in? Who are the clients we should go after? They're the ones doing the work. They know better than you do. You're there to steer the ship. You're not there to navigate necessarily. Finally, constantly reinforce all of these things. Exemplify, pursue, and praise empowerment. When you see it happening, call it out, praise it. It reinforces people's thought patterns. It reinforces that behavior. It demonstrates that it's good and positive. And finally, asking for help is not a sign of weakness. So when people ask for help, treat it as a sign of empowerment and call it out as such and say, Patrick was so kind as to ask for help on this project because it's a technology he's not familiar with. Who is available to help Patrick? Thank you, Patrick, for coming forward and not trying to burn too much time or getting stuck in your own head and getting stressed out about the work or whatever it is. So asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of empowerment, and praise it as such. I want to leave you with this. Empowerment, this philosophy, derived from open source and the ability to crack open the code of what you're doing and control it yourself, make your own changes, set your own destiny around the software you're using, changes everything about an organization, about a dynamic between two people or groups of people. When empowered, a person benefits the company, not the other way around. This is how we all see companies. The company is this big benevolent thing that bestows on us our benefits and our livelihood and our salary and our 401k and our social group. And it's the company that gives us these things, right? It gives us our professional development and career growth. But when empowered, people benefit the company. The company is the recipient of the benefit. And people control their own destiny and therefore the destiny of the organization. Empowerment makes everyone happier and better at their jobs. The change is worth it. Teams experienced increased productivity, quality, and retention. Happier teams. Higher quality work. Clients, they see that quality of work. They're happier. And so the clients are happier because they're getting this great work. They're working with fun people who enjoy what they're doing. It's infectious. And everybody's able to solve their problems. Everybody's empowered to help them. And leadership isn't stuck in the weeds. They can think about long-term goals, revenue streams, initiatives, and be able to grow the organization for years and years to come rather than be focused on what's the current crisis. Thank you very, very much for your time. I really appreciate it.